So as an interviewer, usually if someone says that, I will say something like, yes, that sounds good, or whatever, keep going.
Yeah.
So then it takes time, and it thinks about the product, why it matters, placeholder. So this question, by the way, we're working through is design a product to develop and build hobbies. You're a PM at Meta. How would you do that, right? Very classic kind of question. So it kind of goes through, I'm not going to get into the weeds too much, but this is basically something I'd say like, that makes sense. Okay. It comes up with a mission. Then it does comes up with ecosystem players. And as an interviewer, when I was doing that, I was like, interesting. How did you come up with those? I want to understand your thought process. This is actually something I would potentially say as an interviewer. And I tell people, ask those questions when you work with a Copilot. If it comes up with something that you're not sure why it does it, just ask. And then it actually unpacked its thought process. Like, who are all the people that have a stake in hobby development, right? And it came up with like different stages that could be involved in building hobbies. And based on those, it came up with ecosystem players. And again, timing itself as it's responding. So ultimately, I said, okay, like, sure, that makes sense. Focus on hobby enthusiasts. Okay, as an audience, that's not the segment; it's the ecosystem player. Okay, so within that, it follows my instructions for how you translate an ecosystem player into specific segments. So you've got motivations, how much time do they have, what's their current hobby engagement, and then it came up with 3 segments and scored them based on reach and
understanding. This is pretty good. Like, I love that even it like names each segment. Like, and the names are pretty spot on.
Yeah. So it does all that. And it gives you its reason for which one it wants to focus on. So it wants to focus on the purposeful grower segment, which is the second segment. And it tells you why, it ties it to the mission and stuff. And then it brings it to life with a persona. Okay. And the persona is something that I tell people to do because it helps with problem identification. So it checks in with me. It took it 3.5 minutes to do all that theoretically, right? In real time, it takes like seconds. But it's telling me if I was a human speaking at average length, how long that takes. And then it came up with a journey to come up with problems. And then
I also love that every time it says like, great, let me take a couple of minutes. Like, I love that that's baked in too.
Exactly. So then it comes up with a user journey, and within that user journey, it came up with 3 problems. Now, and it scores each problem based on the frequency with which it comes up and the severity when it comes up. And it picks a problem and talks about why that's important and ties it back to even the mission that we stated earlier, which is something a very strong candidate would do. And as an interviewer at this point, I was like, actually, I'm looking at problem number 3, which is that Sarah like lacks a community of peers. Can you tell me like what's the actual pain point that you're trying to get at? And then it digs into it more, and it kind of goes like literally a layer or 2 deeper, and then it summarizes it as like a core pain point. And then I was like, does that make sense? Can I continue with problem 1 if you're following? And I'm like, yeah, like keep going. So then it gets into solutions. So it takes a couple minutes, thinks of solutions. It's supposed to be 3 completely different types of solutions. Then it picks one based on impact and effort. Okay. So here it picked the 3rd solution. And I asked, hey, and this is a question a real interviewer could ask, like, can you help me understand how all of these solutions actually solve that problem that you picked? Okay. So here it actually goes into like solution 1, solution 2, solution 3. It's realizing solution 2 might only partially solve the problem. So I was like, yeah, can you come up with another solution? Right. And this is where I'm trying to really stress test creativity. It picks another solution. It ultimately asks me, hey, like, do you want me to reconsider? And I'm like, I want to know what you would do. Right. That's what an interviewer would say. So then it picks a 3rd solution, gives me its reason.
Which was the original one that they like listed, I believe, right?
The social, yes.
Yeah.
Social accountability challenges for hobby building, right? And then it goes into what the V1 implementation of that solution might look like. And at the end and it goes through a couple of risks and how it might mitigate those risks. And then I said, because its solution basically assumed we would target this person with some kind of prompt that they should join this like watercolor challenge or whatever. I was like, how would the system know to prompt that person or to like target that person with that prompt? And then it goes into, which is something I would ask a real candidate. And it came up with kind of like how we could use system signals and stuff to figure out who to target. And then I asked why would it be Facebook versus an Instagram, and it kind of answered that. And I was like, cool. It went back and forth. Like, Facebook is better, Instagram is better, Facebook is better. And I was like, okay, what's your final decision? It's like, I think Facebook's better. Here's why. So then it was done. And then I was like, cool, can you now score your own performance? Right. So at this point, it playing the candidate is done. And now I'm asking it to shift gears into like reflection. Okay. So it kind of scores its own. It says it would have taken me like 26.5 minutes to like do all this content. It gives itself a score out from 1 to 5 on every one of the dimensions in this, this evaluation rubric. And then it gave itself an overall assessment with key strengths, key weaknesses, what worked well, what could be better. And that's kind of where this example ends. But you could very, very easily also be like, hey, like I would like you to apply like a slightly more critical lens of your performance. Like, what could you have done better? And it would probably ding its performance a little bit.
And what are you telling people to like do with that evaluation? Are you just like telling them, hey, like learn from the mistakes that the Copilot made so you can do better? And basically, is that?
So the main way that I tell people to use this is there's probably two main ways, like the candidate mode, let's call it. The first way is when someone is working through. So, by the way, really good resource for people getting ready for these interviews is Lewis Lynn's question bank. It's a public question bank. A lot of questions from Meta, mostly Meta, but a lot of like DoorDash, Google kind of questions end up here too. So what I tell people is like, if you're getting ready for like a Meta PM interview, let's just say yesterday, there was a product sense onsite in which someone was asked, as a PM for the DMV, how would you improve the DMV experience? Okay. So if you want to practice that question, you go and use my template. So you kind of start working through that question in my template. So you kind of like start with assumptions and fill out the motivation, all these different sections. Now, you could use my Copilot if you get stuck. So if basically, let's say you're like, how would I come up with a mission statement for this? What kind of assumptions even make sense for this question? So you can go in the Copilot and see how it does it. I always tell people, do human first. So like use your own brain first and only go to the Copilot if you get stuck or you're not sure how to proceed. Okay. That's one way to do it, is just to unblock yourself from continuing. The second way to use it is let's say you don't get stuck, you complete the whole template, but you just want to compare. You see, like, what other way could this have gone? How else could I have approached this? So to kind of like compare your approach.